What's going on, guys? Ribombees teacher in house, and welcome to another draft breakdown for the LGL, the Little Goose League, which, as you can see by the little graphic above me, is a Little Cup League, which is something we haven't played for a long time. The last time I played an actual full Little Cup League, instead of just like tournaments, was back before I started making content about 2 years ago, so it's a nice refresher to come back to Little Cup. The Royal Bournemouth Ribombees are back, which is awesome. Can't wait to be back and playing some Little Cup. For those of you who don't know, I actually love the Little Cup format. I used to play a lot of it way back when. I used to be top 50 in a ladder on multiple accounts. So I've played Little Cup for a while, but my knowledge is a bit out of date because I haven't really played much since like early Gen 7. So this is nice to come back. Thank you, of course, to the Big Goose for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know basically anybody in this league, so this is a whole fresh new experience. The only name that I recognize is not Shady Kid from the URDDL earlier this year, although we never played each other. So yeah, with all that being said, let's talk about our team, because we were lucky enough to get first pick in the draft, which is nice. Leaves us with a lot of power picks open, but also we know we're not going to get like huge amount of power coming back. So a lot of people probably might expect to see the classics, the Wallabies, the Mienfus, Magnemite, Chinchou, Ferroseed, all of these Little Cup Pokemon that have been classics for a while. I didn't pick any of those. As you can probably guess by the details on the screen, I actually picked Grookey first. Which immediately sniped Chicken, who was pick number 2 in the draft, because this was what he wanted. But yeah, we're here with our Grookey. Pretty decent mon, honestly. Decent stats across the board, decent bulk, can definitely take advantage of a Violite pretty nicely. Giving it some very solid bulk. Good physical attack, middling speed tier, but it does get Grassy Glide, which is nice to pair up with his Grassy Surge ability. Knockoff U-turn, Drain Punch, relatively standard on a lot of Grookey sets from what I've seen, done a bit of reading on. But does get a couple of other nice little moves, which I'm going to keep to myself, because there are some cool little techs that I want to run in a couple of matches. But yeah, this thing does get a lot of decent moves. It's a nice pivot as well. It can definitely generate momentum. Do need to watch out for this on U-turning on Wallaby's weak armor or something like that, for example. But yeah, this move on does get decent enough moves. Drain Punch can hit Wallaby relatively well. So not that worried about it. Obviously, after a weak armor boost, Wallaby outspeeds Grookey. But that is something to just bear in mind as and when we get to it. So after this pick, we had quite a long time to go before we got our next picks. So I was kind of surprised at what came back to me, but obviously not too surprising. Wallaby went quite a long way down the first round before it eventually got picked. Chinchou almost made it back to me and got halfway back up, and I was like, that would have been nice to have got that, but ultimately I wanted a fast water anyway, because I do like my cores. So I picked up Wengal, which is pretty much the fastest in the format when it comes to water types, especially on base speed alone. Obviously Scarfers are a thing, but we can just scarf this. But this thing is actually very solid. It doesn't get Drizzle unlike Pelipper, but it does get decent enough moves. It does get Rain Dance as well, so I can use that if I really needed to. We'll talk about why Rain might be important for our team later. But typically, it can run a similar set to Pelipper, default Hurricane Scald U-turn. Pretty standard, again. Another pivot, which is always nice. Decent special attack, that's usable. I can work with that. Also gets Air Slash, so if I don't want a chance to misses, or if I'm not running a rain setup, I can just run Air Slash instead. We're faster than pretty much everything in the format, bar like Abra. So we're pretty decent in that regard anyway. So I like it. Obviously, with heavy-duty boots being a thing now, I don't have to worry about how taking rocks damage, and we're not particularly bulky. Not gonna lie, Wingull is not good for bulk, but that's perfectly fine. This thing can hit pretty hard, and Scald Burning on things like Mienfu would be fantastic. Mienfu does need to run Scarf to outspeed this, so yeah, there's a lot of things that Wingull can do really well. I debated on swapping this thing out for Woobat later on after the draft was finished to pair up with Grookey for Grassy Seed, but it actually limits my potential a lot because Woobat's quite a lot slower, so we didn't pick it up. And the next pick we got, I was shocked this got back to me. Fire types are a premium in this format. There's not that many fire types available in the Little Cup format right now. So being able to grab Torchic is mind-blowing to me. Torchic probably should never have got back to me, if I'm being honest. But I'm pretty damn happy we've got it, because obviously access to defog now, this generation, which it didn't have before, is pretty nice. Workup allows it to be actually a very viable mixed attacker, and Protect Speed Boost is a pretty common set on Blaziken. It also works on Torchic as well. Definitely very, very solid. That's free Speed Boost, giving me access to a lot of things that are normally faster in the tier. This can make it one of the faster Pokemon in the tier, and not actually need to rely on Choice Scarf. Does get Sub, Flare Blitz, gets a lot of moves on both the physical and the special side, so definitely very, very potent and fire type in the format. In my opinion, probably one of the best fire types in the format. Maybe Scorbunny might be slightly better because it's naturally faster, but it doesn't actually get any speed boost advantage, so yeah, definitely a very solid mon. This, of course, can counteract webs as well. Webs is quite a thing in Little Cup at the moment. There are a few decent web setters. Obviously, my favorite web setter is banned, so I can't really do much about that. But yeah, to be able to mitigate it, and with decent bulk, and again, with heavy-duty boots being a thing now, I don't need to worry too much about taking rocks damage, and I can use this as a secondary defogger if I need a filler move. Because generally, you only need Protect and 2 attacking moves, generally. So you can run Defog, you can run Sword Stance, Work Up, various other things like that. So I'm looking forward to Torchic. Torchic's going to be a lot of fun. I think this is probably the best Firewater Grass core of the draft. And I'm not being biased just because it's my draft. But there are a lot of teams missing fires. There are a lot of teams with like suboptimal waters or grasses. I think this is probably the nicest Firewater Grass we could have picked up. There wasn't really anything else I really was that interested in. I thought about going for Ponyta using my free agent points, but Ponyta got picked up, so I didn't get it. I didn't really consider making a transaction for it because my only tier 1 is Grookey. So, but yeah. Moving on next. Again, we're waiting a long time for these picks. And from here on out, largely I just wanted to draft answers to some of the big threats in the format. Things like Abra, Vullaby, Magnemite, Chinchou, these kind of things I really wanted to make sure I had answers for. Chinchou I have a relatively good answer for in Grookey. Obviously if it's a Focus Sash Chinchou, then it can just OHKO me with Ice Beam. So I do need to watch out for that, but I looked for an Abra answer. I was looking for dark types. There weren't that many I was interested in. Purloin was sitting there, but I didn't feel like drafting Purloin. Mostly because I wanted a different dark type, which we'll get onto later. And looking around, I was like, do I want to pick Slowpoke? Well, if I picked Slowpoke, I would have had to have dropped Wingull, and I didn't really feel like doing that. So I picked up the old classic answer, Munchlax. Now, Munchlax is incredibly specially bulky, has a huge amount of moves to work with. That incredible HP stat and special defense means it can easily switch in on Abra. Abra never 2-hit KOs it, even if it spikes. So there's a lot of potential here for Munchlax. It's very, very solid. Thick Fat has a nice ability as well. I can switch it in on the fire moves that Grookey doesn't appreciate. Same with the ice moves and stuff like that. Gets a lot of cool little moves. Gets a lot of coverage. Something to bear in mind. Things like Curse Recycle, especially if you're running Berry Juice. Pretty interesting little set. Toxic is always nice on most things that's not Ferroseed. And Body Slam is pretty spammable for a normal type stab. Obviously, not Return, which is a little unfortunate. Return was probably the best normal type move in the game. We don't have access to that anymore, but Body Slam, still pretty spammable. Power chances and good speed control is never a bad thing, especially when you're pairing up with things like Grookey, or weak armor mons like Dwebble, I think, gets weak armor. Or is it just Crosshole against that? But either way, things like Vullaby and stuff like that. Munchlax, pretty solid mon. Definitely excited to use it again. I've used it before. Good attack stat, decent special bulk that I can play with. I'm pretty excited to use it. We'll see if we can put it to good use. So that's our Abra answer. So I'm still looking around for Vullaby answers, because Vullaby is a really big problem in the format. Now it gets access to heavy duty boots as well. It's even more of a problem. So I wanted something that was faster, outspeeds it reliably, and can hit it super effectively pretty hard. So we picked up Helioptile. Now, I've never used Helioptile before, but this is a fantastic anti-weather, because it gets 3 good weather abilities. Dry Skin, which also provides a water immunity, which is nice against Chinchou, for example. Well, it gets Sand Veil, which is really great for sand teams, especially as it gets Surf to hit the ground types. And it gets Solar Power, which is great against Vulpix. So it gets a lot of good moves that I can work with. Definitely worth using. Gets a lot of coverage. Interestingly, it gets Scale Shot this generation. I don't think I'll ever use that, but it does get it. Volt Switch is always a nice little pivoting option. It does give me things other than U-turners. Surf is great for the ground types like Mudbray. Grass not as there as well for Chinchou. Glare is nice for speed control. Speed control is always nice to have access to. We've got some pretty good speed control already on this team. Wingull, I believe, also gets Tailwind as well, so we've got that option to play with too. So we've got a lot of different speed control options with us. So I'm really excited to give this thing a go. Definitely a very big hard-hitting threat. With its speed tier being base 70 is actually very strong. Good special attacker as well. So Volibee's going to have a hard time dealing with this. Yes, it's 2 normal types, which does make me pretty weak to Mienfoo, but we do have Wingull already. We do have 1 or 2 other things that can semi-patch up our Mienfoo issue as well. Obviously, Torchic does get flying moves and speed boosts, so we have ways to deal with Mienfoo, but not the best. Alright, so we go back to the Dark type conversation that we had before. I was looking out for quite a few Dark types. A lot of Dark types were being taken. I was semi-looking at Magnemite, but Magnemite didn't get back to me, which is why we picked up Helioptile instead. But sitting here still is Impidimp. Now, Impidimp is a really interesting little mon. Not the best overall, but its stats are pretty decent for a utility mon. Obviously, with access to Prankster, I believe it gets both screens as well. But it gets priority in Fake Out and Sucker Punch, which is always nice. It gets nice utility in Thunder Wave. Does also get Rain Dance as well, so I can set up Rain for Helioptile and Wingull if I wanted to. Thief is very nice in Little Cup format, especially if you're using Berry Juice. You can just steal your opponent's item after using it. This used to be the thing with Snubble way back when. You would run Intimidate, you would proc your Berry Juice, and then just steal your opponent's Violite, and then you'd just be annoyingly hard to kill. But yeah, things like that were a thing. Impidimp gets a lot of moves. Also gets very decent stabs in Dazzling Gleam and Dark Pulse, so I can run this thing specially offensive if I wanted to. It doesn't get as much on the physical side, but it does get some decent special moves that I can work with. So I'm pretty excited for Impidimp. Definitely looking forward to seeing if I can put him to good use. I've used Grimmsnarl quite a lot, so hopefully I can put Impidimp to good use in the Little Cup format. And my next pick, obviously now we have a Fairy type. I'm still going to try and round out the rest of my cores. You guys know I love my cores. My next pick is a pick that I really, really like, and a lot of people think it's really bad, but I kind of enjoy it, and that is Gible. Gible, another anti-sand if you like. It does get Sand Veil as an ability, but it also gets Rough Skin, which is really, really nice against the physical attackers, as it is my primary rock setter pretty much. Nothing else on this team really gets rocks, but it does have a lot of decent moves I can work with. Earthquake is a very, very strong stab move. Doesn't get the best physical dragon stab from what I remember. Does get Iron Head, does get Scale Shot this generation now, which could be really interesting to use on it. Definitely a solid move, especially against sub users and stuff like that. So I'm excited to give Gible a go. Gible's a pretty interesting one. Does get some decent special moves, and 40 special attack, while it's not great, it's still serviceable. Does get a decent amount of special coverage, so I have things to work with Gible. Hopefully I can put this little guy to good use. I've used Gible in Little Cup before to pretty good success, but it's a very different format now, so we'll see if I can maintain that success record. So that's now our Dragon done. We've now got a ground type, which helps us against the Volt Switchers and stuff like that, which means we're pretty good here in terms of what we wanted for draft. So we're just missing a Steel type. And from here on out, we decided to pick up Alolan Sandshrew. Alolan Sandshrew is a very, very solid mon in general. I think Alolan Sandshrew's got a lot to offer. Great physical bulk, of course. Obviously, the quad weakness to fire and fighting does not really help it too much, but it is an option nonetheless. But it's got a decent attack stat. Does get priority in Ice Shard, which is nice. It got that from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which is pretty nice. Knockoff is great utility, and it is my spinner, as well as a secondary rocker if I needed it. So I got a few options here. Obviously, I don't really have Hail set up for this thing, so there isn't really too much to talk about in this regard. But yeah, in terms of what we can do with this, having a spinner is always nice. We do have a couple of defoggers, but that's about as far as our removal went otherwise. So having a spinner, And a bulky spinner, definitely nice. Rapid spin got buffed this gen, so it does actually give you a speed boost. So again, we're looking at that speed control quite a lot. This thing does get Icicle Crash, does get Iron Head, does get Earthquake as well. So it does get a lot of coverage moves and decent stab. So I'm looking forward to giving a load of Shrew a go. This was a snipe from someone else who wanted Berg, or wanted this originally. Offered me Bergmite, but I didn't have any room for it because I couldn't pick up a steel. So, but I'm quite happy with Alola Shrew. Even though I'm not going to be able to abuse it in hail rather, I don't really have too much of an issue with that. Alright. So at this point in the draft, we pretty much got everything we wanted. We didn't really need all that much else in this draft. This is a pretty solid team of 8 as is. So I was looking around at the draft, and one thing that I do like to have access to is a grounded poison, particularly as toxic spikes can be a thing. Not much of my team is levitating or a flying type, it's only Wingull, so I went ahead and picked up Venipede. Now, I've not really seen too much usage of Venipede over in the format, but I'm kind of excited to give it a go. It's another speed booster and a decent speed tier of 57 speed. I believe it's actually faster than Torchic, naturally. Does get access to spikes and toxic spikes. Does get a new move, Skitter Smack, which can drop the special attack of your opponent. Pretty nice. Decent enough. It's not the best offensively. It doesn't get a lot of moves, unfortunately for it. I wish it got Fell Stinger. Unfortunately, it doesn't. But if it got Fell Stinger, it would be really sick. But yeah, this thing's a pretty solid mon. Hopefully, I can put it to good use. It's a little lackluster on the bulk. Its only defensive stat as good as its physical defense, and even that's not great. But having an extra spiker and a toxic spiker is generally decent. Hazards are kind of okay in Little Cup format. It can break the sturdies and berry juice strats that things like Magnemite and Onyx typically run. So yeah, I'm excited to give Venipede a go. It may come, it may not. We'll have to see. Alright, so next up, realizing I don't have a Psychic type, which is unusual. Psychics are generally decent in the format. I had a look around, there wasn't really a lot going. I was considering Ralts, but that got picked up. Mono was also a consideration, but that also got picked up. Mime Jr. was potentially a thing, but we have Impidimp, so I didn't really want another fairy if I could avoid it. But sitting there still was Hatenna. Now, Hatenna is a good specially bulky mon in general. Got decent special attack stat with access to Calm Mind. Gets Mystical Fire, which is a nice little move it got this generation to deal with the steals. Which is always good. Decent utility mon with Thunder Wave and Aromatherapy. I can get rid of the toxics or burns on things like the Grookey that doesn't appreciate getting burned and stuff like that. So I've got a few little options here that I can use with this little guy. Doesn't actually get Trick Room, believe it or not, even though its evolutions get it. So that's something to bear in mind. But we're not really all in on Trick Room. It's only really Munchlax looking at Excellent Trick Room on this team. So we're not really all in on Trick Room anyway, but this is a good utility mon. Sitting in tier 5, kind of worth it, not gonna lie. Definitely worth picking up. Magic Bounce is a great ability as well. I can throw hazards away. It's a good deterrent. It can definitely scare people from setting up hazards, especially in this format, because nobody wants webs against them or rocks that they can't remove. Alright, next up in the draft, realizing I don't necessarily have good Magnemite answers. Yes, I have Torchic, but I don't have the best answers otherwise. I decided I was going to grab Wooper. Now, Wooper's base stats are lackluster. I think it's fair to say. It doesn't really have a lot going for it on the stat department, but it does have an additional water immunity. Its only weakness is grass, which is not even that bad because we cover grass really easily with Wingull's Flying Stab, Torchic Stab, and obviously Alolan Sandshrew Stab. We do cover it very, very nicely, even Venipede to an extent. Can take on grasses pretty well. So, Wooper is very, very solid as a utility mon. It's a great wall to Chinchou and Magnemite. It's kind of the classic wall, if you like, because the stabs don't really do anything to Wooper. It's got decent enough utility. Yawn is kind of nice. Encore is also nice against setup mons. Icy Wind, great for speed control, and Toxic, of course, for wearing things down. Decent enough. It does get some good coverage moves on the special side, not so much on the physical side. Does get Ice Punch, even though it doesn't have any hands, which is actually kind of useful against the grasses. It kind of scares them from switching in a little bit. But yeah, Wooper, basically designed to be a wall, that's pretty much it. It's not really going to do much other than that, but it's somewhat passable utility. Now, the last mod on the team ended up not being what I wanted it to be. I was going to look for Sinistea. Unfortunately, we didn't get access to it. However, we did get Rookity instead. Now, Rookity, not really all that impressive, if I have to be honest with you. But it does get some okay things, and things like the Defog. It does get Brave Bird. It's one of the few earlier access Pokemon. It does get Brave Bird. Does get Tailwind. Does also get U-Turn. It does get one little trick move in Power Trip, which may not be too bad if I can get it set up. But it does rely on setup, and you can see its defensive stats are really not all that good. I was hoping for Sinistea. I offered Rookity over to J-Plane for Sinistea. Unfortunately, the trade didn't go through because it wasn't necessarily ideal for him. He also wanted my Hatenna for one of his weaker tier 5s, and I was like, no thank you. So that trade never happened. But yeah, I think either way, though, having an additional Defogger that's actually resistant to fighting, especially against Mienfoo, isn't too bad. We have some okay Mienfoo answers on this team, so I'm not too upset about Rookity. It may come to a game or two, but I doubt it. It doesn't have the best abilities in the world either. Unnerve probably being the best of them, largely speaking, just because obviously berries can be a bit of a thing in this format. I don't think Unnerve procs on Berry Juice. I'll have to check that. I'll have to fact check that one. I'm not entirely sure how Unnerve works against Berry Juice, but it's okay. It's passable. But yeah, that's going to be our draft. Our first match is happening at some point this week versus Nougat Boy of the Fusion Fishious. I'm excited to play him. I'm definitely looking forward to our first game of Little Cup. It's a 13-week regular season, so we've got a long time to relearn the format, and here's hoping we make playoffs in yet another league. But either way, guys, thank you so much for watching. My name is Ribombees Teacher. I'm your coach of the Royal Bournemouth Ribombees. Stay safe, stay awesome. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.